Hello, everybody, and welcome to XPNsion Network. As you know, every single day, accelerating the consciousness of humanity. This is Angel Rebo. This is episode number 3 of the Maverick Mindset Show. I'm known here in the US as, in the world of business, as the CEO confidant, and known in Latin America as the co-founder and president of the Wisdom for Kids Foundation. Gabrielle, and Michael, welcome back to the Maverick Mindset Show. How are you today?
Great.
Doing
How are
good,
you?
thank you.
Doing
Very
good.
well, thank you. Excellent. Thank you very much. So this is episode number 3. It means that we have already had the chance, two times before to have, to get to know Michael and Gabrielle more. And actually, I would like to start the show today maybe with a question that you guys are not expecting. Would you mind sharing, both of you, something personal that nobody knows in your audience right now, or at least something that you have not shared with the audience on this show before? Please go right ahead.
Sure.
Wow. That's open.
Um, Besides spending too much time in school, I've got 4 graduate degrees. I have a real big bug when it comes to Neolithic civilizations. So not only did I travel around the world, for the military, for business, and on spiritual type of journeys, I also traveled around the world to visit some of these great archaeological sites that go back, now, like with Göbekli Tepe and things like that, they're figuring at least 10,000 years. And what I've learned is that there are pyramids and there are major archaeological structures that involve monoliths all over the planet. So we had some method in how to move these things, because some of these, like in Baalbek, have traveled, miles, and they weigh, those stones in Baalbek, where now the Temple of Apollo is, are hundreds, they're hundreds of tons. And, the size, or not the weight, or the weight of, a 707 or something like that. How did the ancients move those? And, there's a lot of speculation into that.
Yeah.
Excellent. That was something that we still didn't know. It's going to be the source of many questions moving forward, so that this is a thread. Okay. What about you, Gabrielle?
I think that it's important for people to know that both Michael and I hold real jobs in our current life. I am a mortgage underwriter, and Michael is a professor at a university. And in that, right, everybody knows we have children, but in my normal course of my life, my biggest no was that I did not want to go down the spiritual road of healing and being a channel and working with energy, right? I just wanted to do my spiritual work like we talk about, right? I just wanted to be left alone to do our spiritual journeys together. And at that time in our lives, we were traveling a lot around the world on spiritual journeys, helping to heal the planet and various other things. So we were going to many, many spiritual sites all over. And that was literally all I wanted to do. And I was very, very adamant about it. I was like, I do not want to be a healer, a psychic. I don't want to do that again. I just want to be a normal person. And so for everybody out there who can totally relate, because there are a lot of us that just want to come in and just do our little part, and that's it. We just want to live our life. The answer is that's not in our prescription, right? It's not part of actually what we agreed to do when we came here. And I can assure you, I fought it straight out for 18 months, meaning my whole career in mortgage came to a crashing halt. And it was devastating financially to us that had happened. At that time, I was making more than $500,000 a year. So it was huge when it fell apart. And no matter how I tried and my connections in the industry, nothing would work for me. And nothing would come together. And I mean, I knew, regional and nationwide presidents of banks, and I could not get a job. So it was insane. And I kept saying, I'm going to find it. I'm going to find it. And I just wanted it so bad. And it's like every door was a brick wall, right? And so finally, one day, I was like, fine, okay, I'm going to do it. I will do it for 6 months. And I will then decide if I'm going to go back into corporate or if I'm just going to do my spiritual work. And then when I finally did that and started to take the steps to reopen my own spiritual gifts, reopen my psychic abilities and healing abilities, that is when my life once again went from a total standstill for 18 months, hitting your head against the wall, to actually beginning to work and come together. And so I did that for a while, just working on my own self and the healing work for clients. And then I eventually went back into mortgage and now do both. So there you are.
Thank you so much for sharing this. It's funny, probably it's not going to surprise you nor anybody at the audience that it's very common that people that feel that they can do so much more for humanity, sometimes they're hesitant, like to move forward and do it on a continuous basis. And so obviously we all appreciate very much your bravery and for taking that decision and for doing it. And I was just going to show here, I think we've shown it before, but I wanted to make sure that people see it here, the ticker line here. You see that everybody that wants to know more about you, I repeat this a few times during the show while we are the show, but please, if you would like to know more about Gabrielle and Michael, feel free to go to GabrielleSpencer.com, and definitely you will see much more of what we share every single week on our show. As you have realized probably today, we are a little bit early, for some constraints that we had to face. We had to do it a little bit early. But obviously, for those of you that come every single Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, US, you will see the Maverick Mindset Show. This is episode number 3. And today we're going to talk about rising above mass consciousness to create peace and prosperity. Isn't it funny that you started to talk about, prosperity? You started to talk about, a large amount of money that probably would provide for you, for your family, to have a pretty decent, comfortable life, and then 18 months of drought, if I may use this term. So how do you? So now talking about let's go to prosperity right now, and how can we? How obviously you had both of you that question at that time, right? How are we going to go back to that path of prosperity where we were before? How would you say? How could we help the audience to rise above mass consciousness to create that prosperity that is so much needed today?
I'm going to start with this. As you were talking, it reminded me of something that I was told early in my career to reopen my gifts and abilities. And it was, whatever you resist persists. This is a very easy statement, but it's so true. The things that we are fighting against, we either don't want to incorporate it within ourselves, or it's something that is constantly bothering us and constantly showing up in our life, like a cycle, right? Or emotions that are constantly showing up in our lives. And you're thinking to yourself, why does this keep happening to me? I mean, that's a common thought, right? And so the answer is that you have to actually deal with the emotion. You can't outsmart it. And that was my biggest issue for a long, long time, was that I really thought that I could think my way through the answer. And I could find the solution by thinking about it really good, right? Really hard. And I finally gave up the need because it wasn't working, right? I figured it out. Like, you have to stop thinking about it. This isn't about thinking. It is about being able to go within, right? So you would meditate or pray or go reach out to a healer to help you work through the energies and the emotions that are constantly being not just triggered within your own self, but triggered all around you by the people around you, by the situations, by the coworkers, by your children, by your pets, your neighbors. they will continually trigger you. And this is on purpose. It's to get you to recognize, see through the illusion and say, okay, there's something here that I need to address, right? And so in order to rise above these things that continually happen in mass consciousness, right, because they're lower vibrational, it's important for us to identify. And so Michael is going to talk more about identifying on the scale of consciousness what the most common triggered frequencies of emotions are that keep you trapped in the cycle of repeating things, banging your head against the wall, getting nowhere, right? Or taking one step forward, 5 steps back, or whatever it is.
Well, before we jump into that, I'll try to address your question too. How do you get out of mass consciousness from the perspective of attaining prosperity, or the more common term would be abundance and things like that? A couple of things that you need to remember is that you may not be here in this particular life to have mass wealth. I mean, you may not. That is not necessarily the purpose for a lot of the term light workers, star seeds, whatever you may be. They're here for a mission, a purpose, and things like that, for their own growth and spiritual evolution. And to get sucked into the trappings of 3D material wealth and prosperity can be a problem. It can pull you off of that path. I know that when our incomes increased to that level, we did get sucked down into the materiality, the keeping up with the Joneses. Oh, we've got to get a bigger house. What happens is your number for satisfaction is always more, and more is not a goal that you should be striving for, because then you are completely immersed in this baseline type of existence. And even though you may have a great life, a lot of prosperity, you may be missing one of the things that's more important than prosperity or abundance, and that's happiness. That's true contentment. That's inner peace. Okay. So prosperity is wonderful, and the goal is to have as much as you can possibly get that still keeps you focused on your mission, on your track, on your own growth and evolution. You don't want to be at the point where you're just chopping wood and carrying water so that, you have to just survive, because then the exact opposite happens. Then you're not focused on your mission, your purpose, your spiritual growth, because you're just trying to make ends meet, and you're sucked into all of the stresses of the 3D reality. So you need to create enough prosperity in your life so that you can find a sense of inner calmness that enables you to move forward in your life, but doesn't overwhelm you to the point where it's all you're focused on. Okay. So we went down that track, and even though we lost everything, and we literally did, we lost everything. We walked away with our credit, and that was it. Lost our home, lost all of it. What it did do was it refocused us. It took us a few months. I mean, we went through the woe is me.
No.
How the heck did this happen?
It took us years.
Okay.
I call them the Groundhog Day years. Like the movie, The Groundhog Day.
Let me ask you something, if I may interrupt you, because, after that amazing, going down like that way, you just described it very, very bluntly, Michael. Sorry if I ask a very personal question. So what made you stay together? Because it's very easy to go down that path of blaming everyone, right? So
it is.
How could we allow this to happen? We were keeping up with the Jones, as you said, and then losing everything.
And what made it worse is we knew literally about a year and a half before it happened that it was going to happen. We knew that the whole 2008 credit crisis, the financial crisis the whole thing was going to collapse. So it was this slow motion type of an environment that we could see occurring. I mean, that's why I went back and got my master's in international management, because I realized that the job that we were in, the whole industry was going to fall apart. And we needed something for me to fall back on. And thank God I got involved with a multinational corporation, and that held us up for a while. But the key is, again, when these things happen, and you're going to get these setbacks, you're going to have these things occur in your life. When they happen, you have to, it's the same thing that happens when something occurs to you in an immediate environment. And we've talked about this before, that triggers you, that sets you off, that angers you, or puts you in a state of depression or something. You have to pull back, you have to detach, you have to look at the scenario for what it is, and then you bring the light into it. You learn from the situation and you begin to slowly work your way back up. There are lessons there. There are things that have put in your place to really propel you forward later in life. And that's what it did. We realized that we were spending too much time involved in wealth creation or things like that. You know, we weren't satisfied with the income that we were getting. We wanted to double it. We wanted to go further. And it was too much. So in essence, you could think of maybe our higher self stepped in and gave us kind of woke us up and said, look, I'm going to put a little humility into you and I'm going to redirect you onto your correct path. And since then, you know, it's been a lot of hard work. That's the other thing. It's personal responsibility.
And action.
Yeah.
And you have to stay in alignment. I mean, it's not that we don't make mistakes. I think that's what everybody has to understand. This is the human experience, and that's part of what we signed up for as well. And really, the whole point of raising yourself above mass consciousness is that you're kind of trying to get the less painful human experience, right? So that maybe, like when I talk about the Groundhog Day years, it's because a whole lot of stuff happened that was horrible. I believe I actually have a webinar about it. It's like everything went wrong. Like we totally lost our touchstone of spirituality, even though we would have said, yeah, you know, we're spiritual. But at that time when we were super busy, not just working, you know, 100 hours a week, but we had 2 infants at the time. Our daughters were very young. Gosh, you know, maybe newborn up to 3, 4, you know, they were really, really small. So it was overwhelming. And this is the problem for humanity, right? We're all in the human experience. And so it's easy to get sucked in and not be able to see through the illusion of what's actually happening. And that is when you get that spiritual 2x4, right? It's when you get hit in the head to say, okay, you all need to realign, and then start activating what you're here to do. Now, all of us have different ages that we get activated. Okay. So Michael was activated very early, and I wasn't activated until 1998. I was like 28 years old, I guess. So the idea here is that everything is a choice, right? We have free will. Everybody knows that we have free will. However, if your vibration is in mass consciousness, your free will is limited to what is available as far as an opportunity would be, or as far as making money or having the love of your life. It's going to be whatever's available in the bandwidth. So if your energy field, you know, not just your aura, but your whole energy field is resonating mostly what I like to call the baseline frequency. So if your baseline frequency is around 100, you know, you're going to be at a basic fear frequency. It doesn't mean that everything is fear. Obviously, it doesn't hit everything, but it's that's what you're attracting, experiences that will trigger that emotion. And that's because that's the bandwidth you're in. And it doesn't mean 100 only, right? We all are fluctuating. There's no straight line. So the point of this is, as you raise your frequency, the idea is that then you're not being hit. And when you can see as well, it's so interesting. I used to say to people, okay, imagine your higher self, which is you, is an airplane, and it's 30,000 feet above your life. It can see the valleys, the ditches, right? The landfills or the landmines. It can see the areas that you go around. But if you're not in alignment and paying attention, you're going to hit whatever is in front of you because you don't see it coming.
Let me pull back for a second about what you were talking about earlier. What ended up happening too is that Gabrielle was forced, after this whole event that took place, she was forced literally to go in and look within herself and say, no, there is a spiritual progression, a path that I have to go on, and it does involve healing. It does involve all of these skills that I already had that she had been neglecting while she was pursuing,
my career,
loans and everything else, all of these big, massive, bundles of properties and things like that. What ended up happening is this recentered her. It put her back onto the path. And within a year, she had begun to develop some really great stuff, dealing with personal healing, dealing with the beginnings of what would become quantum healing. It was things that dealt with how to create interpersonal relationships, how to have abundance within yourself. A lot of things that we still use, we're using now to this date, was driven out of that time. For me, it put me back into going back on journeys, only this time I began to co-lead journeys. I began to become a major helper for other people on their journeys. And, I got a bit of a reputation for that. And people would ask me to come and help them on their journeys to, run the things in some cases. So, they would still be in charge, but I would do the logistics and handle, the activations and all of these other type of things. But what this did is it was a great gift to me, because it put me back into a perspective of what, spiritual leadership would eventually grow to be. So if that hadn't have happened, there's a good chance that even to this date, we may still have floundered and not found our way back. So sometimes, the higher self, it pulls you along into the correct arena that it wants you to go. It's the higher self is living all of these, there's no time for that aspect of our being. It's living it all. It knows what it wants to experience.
Okay, I want to answer two things. First, I want to answer Maria. She's asking if.
Yeah, hold on a second. Hold on a second. No worries. I'll ask the question a little bit later, but I would still like to elaborate. Yeah, I saw her question here, but I would like to elaborate a little bit more on, because it's very common that, not only like you go downhill and, suddenly all this empire or all this, prosperity or abundance disappears, but also it's very common that puts a lot of strength in personal relationships. And I think that people also relate to that a lot. And also the fact that sometimes not both members of the same couple, are like experiencing, actually, you both mentioned that maybe one started to align spiritually, earlier than the other. Did you have yourselves, conflicts among yourselves as a couple, as a spiritual couple, as someone that had a project in common?
Of course not.
I'm lucky I'm still alive.
That's a joke, Angel. Of course. I mean, in our marriage, we have been married for 22 years and together 24. So we've been together a long time. And I don't think the human experience is, pie in the sky. That's not how it's designed. It's designed to help us continue to evolve. And so our relationship at that time, at that particular juncture or disaster, we were going through a very difficult time in our marriage. We both were floundering, not just in financial, but we were lost. Like, what do we do? And that was a really big thing. People, I think, are asking this all the time. Well, what do we do? Like, you can even see stuff happening and you're like, well, what do I do? I don't know what to do. And then you almost don't do anything. So during that time, I mean, we were not at the point of like, okay, we're throwing in the towel, but we were not happy.
No.
And we fought a lot, and there were a lot of things going on so many levels. So Michael had his own struggles. At that time, he was playing WoW, which was a video game super popular back then. And that's where he escaped. And so I
also had cancer. That was a little bit more of an issue.
We didn't get to all of it. And then we had a newborn. I mean, it was a crazy time for us. And when I look back at it, you do wonder, how did we get through it? But the point I want to make is that we are always making a choice. And Michael and I chose to stick it out and move and keep moving. And we got stuck for a while in just status quo, right? Like just kind of skating by while we were trying to figure out stuff. But after a while, we were able to say, you know what? Nothing is working and we need to make a change. And we decided to move back east at that time and said, you know what? It's time for us. Like sometimes I think people think I need a redo, right? And so they will get divorced because they're thinking that's going to be the redo. But Michael and I did not think that. We said, you know what? We need to leave Arizona and we need to go back east and we need to start over. And so we did. We moved back east and he began working for another university in West Virginia. And so we took a little bit of time and just started rebuilding one piece at a time. And so at that time, I was a full-time healer and coach, and Michael was a professor. And we just slowly started building. And then we made a major decision, and we decided, okay, we're going to go to Ecuador for the summer. And we're going to go for the whole time that he was not working. And our children were very small still. And we went and we spent 10 weeks out of the country. And it was probably the best thing we ever did for ourselves, because we got to reconnect with our children. We got to reconnect with one another. We got to talk and really reconnect and decide what we wanted for our future. And we literally, companies make 5-year plans, 10-year plans, etc. And people really don't do this. And we did. We actually were like, what do we want? And where do we want to live? And that was the precursor to us moving to Florida, because that's really where I was happiest, is when I've lived in Florida. And so we came back. Anyway, and so this is our point, is that you have to be able to recognize where you are with honesty, right? And it's not about hurting one another. It's about where are we and what are we doing and what do we each need? What do our children need? And then coming up with the best, plan, but doing it in connection with our own spirit selves, so that you're not running around all over again, trying to figure out what to do. It sort of just all fell into place.
Yeah, and you're going to get hit with it again. I mean, we got hit with it again a few years ago, another big stumbling block, but you just stay persistent and you keep moving forward. And this one had to do with actually getting out and being willing to speak out in public about this topic. This was not something I ever thought I would end up doing. And I had to go through, the quote, dark night of the soul in order to get out here and do it. I was very resistant to it. And everything was just pushed into my face, right to the point where, it's all going to fall apart unless you actually take this step and go forward. Plus with COVID and all of that stuff, I mean, everybody got hammered pretty hard during that time. And there's a lot of
absolutely.
A lot of theories about
totally. You guys are watching episode number 3 of the Maverick Mindset Show every single Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Today it's episode number 3, as I said before, and we're talking about rising above mass consciousness to create peace and prosperity. And as you said before, Gabrielle, we have one of the members of our audience, the very, very active. Actually, she's watching all of our shows here, and her question is, she was actually asking, and she was tapping onto the prosperity concept, and she goes, prosperity is to have a lot of money or not to need it? That's her question. Thank you, Mireya.
In this existence, everybody thinks, when you say prosperity, they think of money, of course. But money without health is worthless, right? And health without money is difficult, but you always have the opportunity to make money. So prosperity for everybody is really about balance, a balance of everything. So you have a balance of health, and you have a balance of time for self and inner prosperity, where you feel abundant, where you feel happy, where you feel connected. All of that is prosperity, right? And when you have that inner, it's a lot easier to draw to you, again, good people, opportunities, and happiness, excitement, things that you might have thought were way out of your reach are suddenly not out of your reach, because you are in that place, that higher vibrational place of inner connectedness and prosperity. So for prosperity, we need money in this 3D existence. That's part of the makeup. There was something that somebody that we know very well still to this day, she had said a long time ago, and it was basically that this experience is meant to challenge us. How it challenges us is up to us, right? So again, we're back to choices, what we are doing to be connected, what we are doing in action. And that's what I see a lot of issues with for people is they're working on things, but they work on them half-heartedly, or they take on too much when they're like, well, I'm going to really begin working on myself. And then it becomes, overwhelming. And then it's something that just gets put aside because it's too much. So balance is hard for us as humans. We tend to overdo it or underdo it. We have a really hard time, being in the middle and making sure that everything in our life we talk about food and, making food. And recently we had a channeling done for our dear sweet dog. And she said,
yeah, we're having a hurricane out here.
There's a huge thunderstorm happening.
Oh, right now?
Yes.
As we speak?
Our pine trees are about bent at 45 degrees.
Yeah, it's raining really hard outside, and Florida famed for fabulous thunderstorms. So it sounds like God bowling, doesn't it?
We've had some squalls that were more powerful than some of the hurricanes that we've had come through. The beauty of it is they only last about 10, 15 minutes. But
this one looks like it's going to last a little longer. Anyway, so the good news is we all have the opportunity for prosperity. And it's in every area of your life you want it. You don't want it in just one area, because then it's not balanced and it won't stay. And that's really our story, right? The story we've shared tonight is, yes, we had money, we had each other, we had a great life and 2 beautiful children, but we were out of step with what our higher self really wanted for us. And once we realized that, we slowly were able to bring ourselves back. And that's really the point. And no matter what has happened to us throughout, because like everybody, you go through things that are hard. Health, like Michael said, he had cancer. He's had other issues because of his service in the Navy. So those things have been something that we've had to deal with, but we do it more consciously, and we try to keep it balanced so we don't get hit with cancer. You kind of take care of things as they come up instead of putting them off. And that's the same in every area of your life. You must be aware, awake, and then willing to listen and take action, because most of the problems are that you knew it all the time. Like, we knew where we were out of balance, but we were unable to do anything about it at the time. We didn't want to, we were too busy, blah, 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 right? Life reasons got in the way. And then, we were kind of forced. And, whatever's happened to us, it's pretty much always the same thing. It's like, oops, we got off there a little bit.
Well, even in relation to that question, prosperity is having a lot of money or not needing to have it and still being happy. That applies beyond prosperity. I mean, that's one of the functions of, somebody that is in higher consciousness as well. You are going to be satisfied with whatever you end up having. That's one of the key things. Be grateful for everything that you have. At the same time, focus on improving the conditions so that you're in a better position where you can help others, or you're in a better position where your life is not so stressful that you are just in survival mode, that you are forced to be in this lower mass consciousness. because there are forces that want to keep you in mass consciousness. And we do need to talk about a little bit more. We went into it a little bit in the last meeting, where we talked about victimhood, shame, guilt, depression, and apathy. And I was hoping maybe we could talk about the other stages of it as well, and then go into the baseline where we really need to be. Would that be okay, Angel?
Oh, absolutely. Please go ahead.
Okay. So remember in our last meeting, we talked about victimhood being the very, very base of consciousness. I mean, if you're in victimhood, you are literally not moving forward. Your goal, if you're in victimhood, is, first of all, never listen to somebody telling you that it's okay to be a victim. That is carte blanche. That is a form of control, bar none. Your job is to get out of that victimhood, however long it takes you to do it, whatever you need to do. Shame and guilt are right there. There's too much shame and guilt in society right now. There's huge elements of society that are using those lower consciousness frequencies to really hold people back. And once again, this is about control. If you feel guilty about something, you need to do the inner work. You need to find what it is. You need to get somebody, if you can't do it yourself, to help pull that out, expose that, and transmute that energy into something more positive. We talked about apathy. Apathy is the overlay right now. This is the real tool that the dark forces are using against humanity right now. They want everybody to be in this complacent mode. I can't do anything. This is the life I've been given. No, step out of apathy, move forward. It takes a plan in some cases. It takes, just like we had to do. We did a 1 year, a 2 year, a 5 year plan, and then we stuck to it. And it was hard some cases. You can sit there and cry about the spilled milk all day long, but all you're going to have is tears and the spilled milk still sitting there. So you've got to move forward. You've got to create an action plan for that. Or you end up in depression. That's the big horrible thing that we see now. So many people are on depression. And what's our modern medical system have? They have the psychotropic drugs just sitting there waiting for you. How many people are on the Paxils, Zolofts, all the rest of them? I don't mean to use those titles directly, but I mean, in America, you're not on one of them before you're on 2 or 3. Okay. And all those do is put a Band-Aid over this problem. They make you feel a little bit better about yourself, but the underlying problem's there. You need to address the underlying problem. When I got cancer, I had to figure out what caused that cancer. What do I need to remove out of my body? Emotionally, my mental thought processes, and physically. I mean, I went on my tree bark and alfalfa diet and went through another very, very rigorous process so I wouldn't have to do chemotherapy and radiation, because I found out that my cancer would reoccur. Should I do that? I have the same chance of it reoccurring in the same, if not worse case, in the 8 to 15 year mark as if I did these other approaches. So I chose not to. I'm not saying that that's what other people should do, especially with late stage cancers, but that was mine. So what's the next stage? Because this is another one that we just had a very close personal friend have to go through, and we went through ourselves. That's grief. We lost, during this COVID thing, 2 very, very dear close friends to COVID or to COVID associated type of things. And it was hard for us. It was very, very painful. These were lifelong type of friends. They were our children's godparents. And to see them go within a few months of one another, and knowing there was nothing that we could do because family members had stepped in and directed them down a healing course that literally killed them both. You have to be able to overcome grief, because there's another type of grief that a lot of us don't deal with, and it associates with grief or guilt, and that's inner grief. That's this inner ability. Our next door neighbor, his sister just lost her husband, and she is in deep, deep grief, and it's stopped her life completely.
And you could say grief, though, about choices you've made.
Yes.
Choices you've made or actions you've taken, money that you've lost. These things are guilt and grief. They go together, right? You feel bad. I shouldn't have done that. I should have known better. How you're always second guessing yourself, and you don't trust yourself. And that's what that creates. Grief, guilt, depression, they're all symptoms of not trusting, not just yourself, but not trusting God. And this is it's just running rampant in our society. You can see it everywhere, that people feel disassociated, right, from one another, from themselves, and from God. And therein is a large part of what keeps us in mass consciousness, lower frequency, is that these emotions continually to cycle and create those deeper issues, like we're talking about, that inner love, inner self-love, and love and connection with God. So you can see why you would want to do the work to create those connections, so that you're not recycling into those very low frequencies, creating more and more problems, because that's what happens. Like, just like ignoring health problems, it doesn't get better, right? It just gets worse, and it creates other problems. And it's the same when you are cycling in mass consciousness.
Yeah, and dark force, dark entities will, just like Gabrielle said, they will use a number of different things, grief and guilt, to then get you so frustrated you either go into depression or you go into anger. In anger, you go into blame. And then you go into outright hatred. You begin to hate God. How could God do this to me? Folks, most of our lives are pre-written prior to coming in here. I mean, we have free will to move around through those major decisions, but we have key nodal points where big events are going to happen. You can push them off for maybe a year, and in some cases, you can maybe remove one or two. But those things, you design the life with your guides, if you want to think of it that way. You're not going to escape it. And the higher self wants these experiences, and it doesn't just want it in you. It wants it in all of the myriad dimensionalities of you that are existing as well. It will try out and seek the flavor out of how that will feel for all of it, because it's growing, it's evolving, it's you in your totality as it is experiencing everything, this grand game and all of its components. So when you think of that, let's jump into the big one. I mean, this is the one that everybody's aware of, fear. Everybody, they say there's like two emotions, baseline emotions that are out there, fear and love. Well, fear is just one of the elements of these lower mass consciousness frequencies. But fear is the one that the dark always is a fallback. Now probably apathy is more so, but fear has always been the one. When you're in, think of what you feel like when you're in fear. When you're in real fear, are you in a higher state of consciousness? Are you coming up with great ideas? Do you feel good about yourselves? Are you able to solve great problems? Any challenge comes up to you, you feel like you're insurmountable? No, you feel like that when you're in love, when you're in joy. That's when you feel like you can. When you're in fear, you're in a flight or fight syndrome. And sometimes you're just fighting against yourself, or you're fighting against all of the elements that are part of your life, your environment, that make up how your existence is. So who do you think wants you to be in fear? Those who want to control you, okay? Dark elements of reality have used fear throughout all of human history, and will continue to do it on whatever other worlds they can get their mitts in, I guess. But you must overcome fear. And again, how do we overcome these lower? A lot of it has to do with the mindfulness of the situation itself.
Let me
it's
interrupt you a
really
little
easy
bit
to be overcome.
before you go down.
Sure.
Before you go down that route, there's something that actually intrigues me a lot, because you both have had a pretty international career myself, and I have had to go and travel a lot of places. And you would say, how does that relate to what you're talking about, and then fear and rising above mass consciousness? Because I think that when you are open, willing, and able to go to all those other places, and you mentioned several archaeological places, I think that you learn a lot. You'll see how other people from other cultures learn to rise above consciousness. You learn from things that you see, carved in stone in those archaeological locations. So, and I would like to share that with the audience, because I think that bringing this additional viewpoint of how different cultures see rising above mass consciousness differently can add actually some hints on how to deal with what you were describing. Could you elaborate a little bit more how you both think that this being exposed to so many cultures has changed the way you see how to rise above mass consciousness?
Well, one of the things too, in addition to looking at the Neolithic and all of the, big cultural places and stuff like that, what I would recommend you do is, and I did this normally anyway, because my background was intelligence in addition to special operations. In special operations, we all have certain fields, and intel was mine. I asked a lot of questions. I would recommend, if you travel and you go into these places, don't just go and see all of the sites. Talk to the people and ask them open-ended questions. Then listen. Listen to I would ride on the local buses, the local trains. I'd stay in local hotels. I can't do that so much with Gabrielle, but but we did do it for a period of time.
I was a trooper.
Yeah,
Come on,
you were.
Be fair.
But I would be on the train, and I would just sit down and I would spark up a conversation. And sometimes I could barely speak this. We could barely communicate. Most everybody can speak English out there. It's
a little bit of it,
yeah.
anyway.
But you just sit there and listen, and you show an honest interest in what they have to say, and you will be amazed that people will open up to you, and you will see that there is true beauty out there in the world, in everyone's culture, in everyone's, every racial, cultural consistency has true beauty. You'll also find out that there is some real evil there too. It's not all just, it is a duality world. But if that's your focus, then that's all you're going to find. If you're focusing on the positive parts of people, you're going to find out that, for me, it completely changed my outlook. I really learned how to love humanity. I thought to myself, wow, this is really worth saving. That's all I've got.
Okay, so in my travels around the world, there's something that it did for me. It made me super grateful for what I have and living in this country. But what I noticed about other cultures is how they too are grateful for their existence, however they're living it. When we were in Tibet together, I felt terrible for the dogs, the children, everybody, because from my point of view, they're living in poverty, right? It's sad, it's dirty, it's whatever. And what's amazing about them is they don't see that. They don't consider themselves poor. They don't consider themselves living in poverty or not having. Yeah. They're happy with what they have.
Prosperity takes on a whole
What was that?
meaning.
Yes, exactly. Prosperity has a whole different understanding. They're more in touch with their own inner self, and their family connections are so important to them. And, that's part, again, of that disconnection that we experience more of here. I know in our country, we're a little more isolated. We are not as, welcoming to a stranger who comes to the door. We're not as open and as welcoming. Where in other cultures, how many times did people invite you in to eat with their family? And, they have so much less than you have.
We're losing ourselves to these things.
I know you love the phone thing, but it's even before the phone thing, Michael. The thing is that in other countries, the way they rise above mass consciousness is that they actually do talk to one another. They do share in storytelling and telling stories that have value, that teach you a lesson. One of the things Michael and I did with our two daughters when they were small is we bought children's stories, Buddhist children's stories, because they actually taught beautiful lessons about, sharing and not looking at something and taking it for what it looks like, but actually discovering what was within it. And so there's just a broader understanding in other cultures about what we're talking about in our modern culture are missing. And it is connection and understanding your relationship with God and with one another, and treating each other like you would treat, what they say, if Jesus were to come to your door, would you turn him away because you didn't recognize him? And that, of course, means one another, not judging one another, but rather if somebody is in need, giving a helping hand, and even people that aren't in need. I remember when we moved to Arizona, I was from Florida, and people here are just, to me, they're just so friendly. They're so nice. The cashiers at the grocery store, hi, how are you? Having a great day. And I remember when we moved to Arizona, I said to Michael, the cashiers never smile. They never say, hi, how are you? Nothing. And I missed it. It was like such a difference, East Coast to West Coast. And I just remember saying that to him, that really struck me, because I had never been, I didn't live in the West Coast before that. I'm an East Coast girl. Michael's a West Coast boy. So there you are. That was just a small cultural thing. But for all of us, I realized that other cultures, while they may be simpler, I think that they're closer to the answer maybe than those of us who feel like we're more sophisticated.
Yeah, that's a fascinating answer. You were talking about, fear, and how fear plays a key role, and how we are consistently taking into a fear space, no matter what it is, no matter what happens, we all eventually fall into that place. As I was listening to the storm that was close to where you live, and I was listening to the to the thunder, I was also wondering myself if all those other cultures and places that you have visited also are much more connected to nature, and maybe they can find easily other answers to those questions that you guys were just wondering, right? So how to rise above consciousness. So not only prosperity and abundance, the concept itself it varies, from one culture to another, but also the relationship to the environment. How do you see that yourself?
Well, when you look at the world, 20% of the world doesn't even have access to electricity, good plumbing and things like that. Another 20% doesn't have access to reliable electricity. And, in America, we take that for granted. We can't imagine, when we have a hurricane or something out here and people lose power for a week or two, they completely freak out, and justifiably so. It's hot here, and it can be pretty hard on people, especially elderly. But these other parts of the world, when COVID hit, we were so immersed in fear and everything else. There's entire regions of the world hardly even knew COVID was taking place. It wasn't even hitting many of those places, so you have to put fear itself into a relative perspective. You have to ask, why is fear so powerful for the forces of opposition? How is it that they're able to, because what fear does is it puts us back into the most basic kind of, like I said earlier, animalistic component of our reactions. It's flight or fight. I have to either react to something, and then what happens? I go into anger, I go into all sorts of other things. Or fear now in the developing world, or the developed world, is about lack for whatever reason. I'm fearful that I'm not going to have enough. I won't have that prosperity. I won't have all of that. And what's the next frequency in mass consciousness just above fear? It's the desire body. This is what the Buddha taught everybody. The keys to suffering was our continuous desire for more and more materiality. Okay? So desire is a very tricky element. If you are desiring more prosperity, if you are desiring more abundance, then you're locked into this lower form of consciousness. You should seek more prosperity, but not be tied up into that lower consciousness component. And remember, it's not just the emotions. That's the outward display. It's what's seated in your subconscious that becomes the big triggering elements for those emotions. I went through something like that just over the last few days. This same thing that deals with my own personal senses of self-worth and where I want to be in my life, associated with guilt and a sense of grief. So we're all going through it. And me, myself, I have to go into mindfulness. I have to pull out, observe what's happening, see the energetics, look for some dark element coming in to try to influence me, remove that component, and then seek out better positions, better solutions for what I want to do. Reject these ideas.
Let me ask you a excuse me, let me ask you a final question, because it's a controversial question. When you were talking about, I mean, it's so related to fear. It's so related about the process that we're just describing, Michael, which is about the fight or flight, right? So we have been told for so long that there's three different brains, right? The reptilian, blah blah blah. But what if that was just a construct to make us like really believe that we have to do that we have like an old, animal, way of reacting? What if even what Darwin was teaching was real or not? You know what I mean? So how far does this construct or matrix go as to believe that we have to do things in a certain way? Sorry to be so provocative
No, it's
with
okay.
this last question.
I'll tell you what, let me answer it in 2 sentences. Then I'm going to give this one over to Gabrielle, because she really, really knows about this. Fear was put into place, for us as hunter-gatherers for periods of time. You have to think about it. Fear is a useful tool. It tells you, hey, that's a saber-toothed tiger. You better be a little bit aware that creature is going to tear you apart. You either better prepare yourself to fight and adrenaline up and get around the bend, or get the heck out of there. Okay. But we are evolving out of that state. So there are elements that want to keep us into that state, because again, you're easily controlled in fear. You're not seeking, when you're in fear, you're not seeking higher consciousness. That's the bottom line.
All right. So based on that, our minds, we come in with our minds in charge. And part of your mind, of course, is the subconscious, your conscious, and then the uber conscious, right? What is it called?
Superconscious.
Thank you. Superconscious. All right. But your mind is in control. Its job is to keep you alive. And therefore, it is, constantly seeking, right? You're constantly on alert for what may plummet you, or, keep you, might hurt you, or keep you from surviving. And so your subconscious feeds your mind. And this is the program and how it runs. And so it literally is meant and is programmed to keep you in these lower frequencies, because again, it keeps you controlled. It keeps you surviving. So you're not going to die. That's really the job. In order to overcome it, you have to bring your heart and your spirit self into a higher vibration, so that then your mind and your ego, which is connected to the mind. This is why, Mike, we haven't gotten to ego in mass consciousness, but that is after anger, right? And so you have ego. Well, ego and the mind go together. So when people say, there was a long time in the spiritual movement where people talk about you have to kill the ego. And I used to laugh to myself. You can't kill any aspect of yourself. What you need to do is bring it into balance, because it's part of you and it's part of our experience. It's part of how we operate. So yes, you are human. So for all of us, as we work through and heal our heart and our emotional body, then we are able to work on our mind. So I tell people, you don't start by working on your mind and reprogramming your mind, because it has its program and you can't outthink it. That's just not going to work. But when you heal your heart and your emotional body, you're then able to bring your mind into balance, because a lot of what your subconscious holds on to is memory. Memory is made by trauma and emotions, right? So you remember, you have good memories and then you have bad memories. Well, many times in order to keep you safe, your subconscious will remind you of a memory, usually of a trauma or something that hurt you, a person that hurt you, or a situation that you recognize. I'm seeing the signs and this person is doing exactly what person X over there did. And so I'm not going to do it because it's going to hurt me. And so then you don't choose maybe to do something because it could go wrong, because it has before, and you remember this through your subconscious. So our mind is a super powerful tool. When it is brought into alignment with your heart and your spirit, and you make that triangle, which is sacred geometry as well, that is when you are in balance. And that is when you are super powerful from within yourself. And you're able to then rise above the areas that we've been talking about, that your subconscious is always reminding you, your ego is always reminding you. Those are the elements used that keep you in mass consciousness.
Yeah, I mean, the end goal for this
Excellent.
is that you raise your consciousness, the term vibration, your frequency, everything else like that. You raise that above these states so that these states don't affect you. The key is you have to be able to hold this higher consciousness. Right. So, the last one I want to talk about is anger, just really quick, because this has been my big one throughout my life. And anger is an easy one to get triggered. If you are easily triggered on anger.
Excuse me.
Sure.
Excuse me, Michael. I would like to hold on to that thought and start the next show with that thought. But I think that anger, anger has been so extensively used in the last 3 years. It's like it's a continuous, like throwing more gas into the fire. And I would like to talk about the way that we have been fueled this anger, because I think there's a lot that we can discuss about it. And I would hate to only take a few seconds at the end of this show. This has been, again, it's an amazing show. You guys have such a rich, wealth of events that have happened in your life, so many experiences, that it's really fascinating to, dig into them and relate them to what you do today. So it's really a blessing to have you with us.
Thank you.
What an incredible show. The episode number 3, the Maverick Mindset Show. If people would like to know more about it, as I said before, GabrielleSpencer.com. Actually, there's an email address you can send emails to, which is info, INFO, at GabrielleSpencer.com. And she definitely will answer your questions. They have a lot of different programs that you can actually ask information about. Again, go to GabrielleSpencer.com. And rest assured that next week we'll be back here with episode number 4 of the Maverick Mindset Show, every single Wednesday at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Gabrielle, Michael, we really hope that the water and the thunder, by the way, I don't know if you realized, Gabrielle, but before when Michael was answering, there was just the thunder at the same time. It was like giving Michael even more strength to his answer. I don't know if you realized that happened. It was very clear to the audience that happened before. Absolutely. No wonder.
Yeah, that's your favorite.
No wonder.
Thor is his favorite.
2 powerhouses joining. Exactly. 2 powerhouses, excuse me, joining forces. So again, thank you very much for being with us today. And to everybody else, thank you for being with us today. Episode number 3 of XPNsion Network. We are every single day accelerating the consciousness of humanity. What a better way to do it on a Wednesday night than with Gabrielle and Michael Spencer. A wealth of experiences, a wealth of knowledge, a wealth of wisdom. See you next Wednesday. Sure that you have enjoyed this as much as we have. We love you guys. See you soon. Bye-bye.